if a child is suffering from vision problems and doesn't have it corrected, the headaches, for one thing, that they must be suffering.
Concentration levels drop away.
Yeah.
Yeah. My son had nystagmatism, which is a spraying of light to the eyes, and I remember him sitting in the car, and he said, "Oh, gee, I can read that street sign. Those trees over there got leaves on them." Because he hadn't realised, we hadn't realised that
how bad his vision was.
No, he could read all right, but it was
see.
Yeah. So it's all those sort of effects come through.
All right. Very interesting. Just on a final note here, by the way, gosh, I would love to be able to read more of your Carlist Day tweets and emails and texts, but boy, we have been inundated. A panel, I was only 10 at the time, but have a vivid memory of Dad coming home from the CCC where he worked and telling Mum about the hysterical thing that happened at work that day. And just another exemption story. Carlist Days and malls. What's this one? No, I want to get into this one before we go, because an opinion piece and stuff from a baby boomer talking about how much he enjoys retirement. He thanks recent young commentators for continuing to support his pension by paying taxes, just like he did for his parents and grandparents. He writes a long description about his days now that he doesn't work, and ends with his argument he deserves it after working full-time for 47 years. He says those who are blaming rich old boomers for ruining the world should keep working and think of the long game. That one day they'll get to have a self-indulgent retirement, as he does, because if you work, you deserve it.
Yeah, but not all baby boomers are wealthy and all that sort of thing. There's
this one is.
Well,
this one is.
But is he average? There's an awful lot of people who are baby boomers who live just on the pension.
Yes.
And that's all they get. So we need to be aware of that. Not all baby boomers can afford to, go off and do whatever they want.
What's your take, Paula? He says, look, we struggled with our first mortgage of 21% after years of wage and mortgage freezes. We lived in a cardboard box, for example.
In the middle of a road.
Walked to school in bare feet.
Stop picking on us. Stop picking on us.
Why always fighting against each other? Why does it have to be such an intergenerational debate all the time? Aren't we all in this together? Yes, they did pay their taxes for 47 years, and I don't begrudge them a pension, obviously.
Yes, you do. I can tell it in your tone. I can tell. There's something about your tone you do begrudge.
You can't wait for a gold card, can you, Paul?
Oh, crikey.
Come on.
I'm a wee way off.
What have you got against baby boomers, Paula?
Oh, no, nothing whatsoever. Nothing whatsoever. I'm kind of sick of this
Here we go.
pitting against each other that happens from both directions.
Yes.
We're actually all, whānau. We all have parents or grandparents who are in a different demographic. They have kids and grandchildren who are in a different demographic potentially. So can we just, get on with it?
Do you think that are boomers being upset and being told continually they're ruining the world? They were the lucky generation. They've had it all, and they turn around and go, you know what, Chris? No, we didn't.
We didn't have
work
it all.
hard.
No, absolutely not. My grandparents never had a bank account. Never had a bank account.
What did they do with their money?
It was in my grandfather's back pocket in a wallet.
What?
Wow.
Because they lived in rented accommodation all their lives. They came through the Depression, all that sort of stuff, but they never moaned about it. They just got on with their lives, but they never had a bank account.
There you go. So a message to our millennial listeners, get on with your life.
Stop fighting with each other.
That's right.
Love each other, says
amongst ourselves. Love each other. Love each other.
Chris Orr, Paula Penfold, fantastic. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Wallace.
Thanks for
to Ellie for putting the
Wallace.
show together. See you tomorrow.
Kia ora, o te porokaramu, no te ai. It's Cook Islands Language Week. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. Tonight, MPs are passionately arguing over the government's new abortion bill as Winston Peters prepares to explain why he surprised Andrew Little with his talk of a referendum. Police are still on the hunt for a suspect after a deadly hit and run following a police pursuit in Christchurch yesterday. Meanwhile, residents of a Christchurch neighbourhood are set to get some rates relief following the unexplained explosion that turned one house to rubble and sent roof tiles and other debris raining over others. 2 bodies are found in Canada after a weeks-long manhunt for 2 teens charged with murder. There's hopes autopsies will give more answers. High tide at Bethells Beach as $3 million worth of cocaine washes up, and former All Black Sir Brian Lahore farewelled in Masterton.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The debate on the controversial abortion legislation bill is underway in Parliament. MPs will vote as individuals according to their conscience, except for New Zealand First, which will support the bill at least for its first and second readings. The bill would remove abortion from the Crimes Act and instead treat it as a health issue. After 20 weeks, women would require a medical test to access an abortion. The Justice Minister Andrew Little told Parliament the primary objective of the legislation is to shift abortion away from the criminal regime, but acknowledged the diversity of views.
I am acutely aware that this issue is freighted with deeply held personal, political, faith-based and emotional views which lead different people to different conclusions.
If it passes today, the bill will go to Select Committee for public consultation. Armed raids are being carried out around Christchurch as the police continue their hunt for a man following the death of a pedestrian in New Brighton yesterday afternoon. The homeless man died after being struck by a stolen van following a police pursuit yesterday. The hunt continues for 21-year-old Liam Strickland, who fled. The police say he has links to Black Power and is dangerous. An advocate for the homeless, Tina Doherty, says people have been rallying to support the victim's family.
It's a tragic thing to have happen. New Brighton is such a wonderful community of collective, colourful souls. Our thoughts go to the family. We were there this morning that need help with petrol vouchers and food.
Tina Doherty is encouraging people to donate to cover funeral costs. The rugby great Sir Brian Lahore has been farewelled by a crowd of thousands at the Waited Upper Ground in front of the grandstand that bears his name. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and about 100 current and former All Blacks were among mourners at the funeral at Masterton Memorial Park this afternoon. Sir Brian's son, David Lahore, told the crowd his father travelled the world with the All Blacks as the team's captain and then as its coach, but he was most at home in the shadow of the Tararuas.
He was mostly like you and I. His grandson mentioned to me the other day, I didn't know BJ was so famous. And I think that was what was so good about him.
David Lahore says his father loved rugby and farming, but nothing could compare to his passion for his grandchildren and theirs for him. The serial rapist Stuart Murray Wilson will be released from prison, but he will return to his house on the grounds of Whanganui Prison. Dubbed the Beast of Blenheim, Wilson was jailed for 21 years in 1996 for violent sexual attacks on women over more than 2 decades. And last year, the 72-year-old was sentenced to a further 2 years and 4 months imprisonment for other historical rapes. Sarah Robson has more.
Wilson was subject to an extended supervision order following his first release from prison. As part of that, he had to live in a house on the grounds of Whanganui Prison, where he was under constant GPS monitoring. He was unable to leave without agreement from probation officers. The parole board has decided Wilson can be paroled, but he will go back to that house under strict conditions. The board said with controls on his whereabouts, his capacity to reoffend was no longer an undue risk. He will be released later this month. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
West Aucklanders are shocked that more than $3 million of cocaine washed up on their local beach. 19 tightly wrapped packages about the size of a videotape were found last night on Bethel's Beach. The police are trying to work out where the drugs came from and the intended destination. One beachgoer, Sandra Murphy, walks her dogs at Bethel's Beach a few times a week and was very surprised at such a find. She says it's a clean beach and barely anything washes up in the surf.
No, never seen anything strange out here. But when you mentioned about the cocaine, I suddenly thought about white powder and I thought, I wonder what's that? But the dogs were sniffing it there because, usually I'm a bit of a beachcomber and I look around the beach as I'm walking along. So you never know what washes up on these beaches, do you?
Sandra Murphy at Bethel's Beach. Port Taranaki has praised the quick actions of its staff who rescued a man swept out to sea off a New Plymouth beach. The head of operations, Ashley McDonald, says the port's launch, Mikotahi, responded to a Coast Guard call for assistance about 11:30 this morning. Captain McDonald says the crew located the man about 600 metres offshore from Back Beach about 15 minutes later, but he was not in a good way.
Very close to giving up, really. He'd been in the water quite some time, and I hope he bought a lotto ticket because the response time was great, and he's very lucky indeed.
Captain McDonald says the man had been walking his dog when he was knocked over by a large wave and dragged out in a rip. St John Ambulance transferred the man, who was in a serious condition, to Taranaki Base Hospital. It's coming up to 5:05. Countdown is recalling a brand of nuts sold in its stores for the past month because they contain higher than normal levels of the poisonous mould aflatoxin. The company says its Woolworths brand Crunchy Natural Almonds snack pots were sold in stores around the country between the end of June and Tuesday this week. In sports news, a sense of experimentation has disappeared in the All Blacks team named for Saturday night's Bledisloe Cup test against Australia. Coach Steve Hansen has today unveiled very close to his strongest 15 for the match in Perth. Clay Wilson reports.
The biggest change sees open side specialist Ardie Savea named for his first test start at blindside flanker. Savea will form a powerhouse loose forward trio alongside captain Kieran Reid and Sam Cane. Hansen's stuck with the twin playmaker setup of Richie Mccaw at first five and Beauden Barrett at fullback, while Scott Barrett makes a timely return from injury at lock, replacing Brodie Retallick, who's now injured himself. Dane Coles replaces Cody Taylor at hooker, while Anton Leonard-Brown starts at second five in place of Sonny Bill Williams. A win in Perth will see the All Blacks keep the Bledisloe Cup, which they've held since 2003. Ko Clay Wilson aho.
Meanwhile, the Wallabies have rolled the dice, naming James O'Connor for his first test start in 6 years. The 29-year-old, whose promising career went off track after alcohol and drug indiscretions, has been selected at centre. Star flanker David Pocock has not been named as he continues to recover from an injured calf. And the Phoenix will face their former coach in their first match of the new A-League football season. After leaving the Wellington side at the end of last season, Mark Rudin will return to the capital with new team Western United for the round one match on October 13th. That's the news.
An interest rate cut surprise.
I'd say it was the terrorist chainsaw massacre of interest rates yesterday.
The government is cautiously confident.
This is not about an immediate crisis in the economy. It's about the fact that, yes, growth has slowed.
But how do you get growth?
Yes, I think we would advance some infrastructure spending. The question of how fast, how quickly is still open to debate.
On the Money, Morning Report with Corin Dan and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, a unique way to tackle gender diversity in the workplace. All qualified staff are considered for a job with the option to opt out. And after 10, the impact of Aussie convict slang on today's language, with Melbourne-based author and self-proclaimed convict nerd Simon Barnard. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Occasional showers, possibly heavy and thundery, mainly in the west. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape. A few showers gradually clearing tomorrow, but rain returning later again in the day. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly fine. Isolated showers about the Tararua district. Scattered rain tomorrow, gradually clearing apart from southern Wairarapa. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly fine. Showers or rain developing tomorrow evening. Bulla and Westland, showers becoming widespread this evening with possible thunderstorms. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow before rain returns tomorrow evening. Fiordland and Stewart Island, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, turning to isolated showers this evening and gradually clearing tomorrow. For the remainder of Southland and Otago, scattered rain spreading north tonight, clearing tomorrow morning, then showers developing tomorrow night. Chatham Islands, fine tonight. A few showers tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks very much, Susanna, and thank you for tuning in. You are with Alex Perrottet, Checkpoint on RNZ National. As we speak, MPs are about to vote on the highly contentious issue of abortion reform. The legislation has not just caused division in Parliament, but also prompted accusations of bad faith dealings between Labour and its coalition partner New Zealand First. The bill would remove abortion from the Crimes Act and instead treat it as a health issue, and after 20 weeks, women would require a medical test to access an abortion. MPs will vote as individuals according to their conscience, except New Zealand First, which will vote as a bloc. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
As the newly appointed Labour leader Jacinda Ardern announced during an election debate, she wanted to see abortion removed from the Crimes Act. Nearly 2 years later, she made this address in Parliament this afternoon.
The time is right for this debate. The time is right for us to finally put women's dignity and their rights at the centre of this discussion. And I ask as we do so, that we do so with dignity. I finish with, again, the words of someone who wrote to me only recently. It's time to change New Zealand's outdated abortion laws. Please show us your respect for women. Show us you recognise we're capable of deciding what's right for us. Give us our dignity back.
The Justice Minister Andrew Little acknowledged the deeply held political, personal and faith-based views held by MPs across the House, but outlined his reasons for progressing the bill.
Mr Speaker, in my view, it is wrong that our present law characterises a decision a woman wishes to make about her own body and her reproductive choices as criminal. And it is wrong that in making that decision, a woman has to go through a set of processes that no other person seeking a medical procedure has to go through.
The National MP Agnes Lohenny outlined her opposition to the bill.
As the statistics show, abortion is overwhelmingly not about a mother's health, particularly in the first trimester. It is about decision to terminate a life for lifestyle reasons. We should, as a society, have the courage to admit that.
Her National Party colleague Jerry Brownlee said if there was better support for women raising children by themselves, then maybe fewer people would opt for abortion. But he said he opposed the bill and outlined some of his concerns.
The possibility of gender selection, which for a lot of cultures in New Zealand will be a reasonable thing to do, goes to the concerns about genetic selection, which for a lot of people will be something that they're keen to investigate. And then there is the issue of there being virtually no question at all up to the 20-week mark.
In the lead up to today's vote, there was another debate going on about the negotiations between Labour and New Zealand First about the legislation. There's been a lot of back and forth between the two parties about whether the negotiations, spanning several months, were held in good faith and whether Labour should have anticipated a New Zealand First push for a referendum. Tracy Martin is the New Zealand First MP who conducted the talks with the Justice Minister. She made these opening remarks in this afternoon's debate.
I was going to speak about Beverly Williams, my mother's birth mother. I've talked about Beverly in this house before. We never knew Beverly. My mother doesn't really remember Beverly. Beverly left her 2-year-old daughter and 5-year-old son in 1943. And it took well into the 1980s for us to find out what happened to her. But that story will have to wait. Because, as often happens in this place, Mr. Speaker, events has moved on, and so this speech must change.
She said she wanted to set the record straight and told Parliament a referendum had never been raised either in her talks with Mr Little or by the caucus until their meeting at Parliament on Tuesday morning. At that meeting, Ms Martin's colleague Derek Ball got majority support to put forward an amendment calling for a referendum.
At the conclusion of the caucus, approximately midday on Tuesday the 6th, I informed the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and the Minister of Finance of the New Zealand First Caucus position. At approximately 1 p.m. on Tuesday the 6th of August, I personally informed Minister Little and his advisers of the New Zealand First Caucus decision and apologised to him for the lateness of this development.
Tracy Martin confirmed her party would vote for the first and second readings and then put forward the amendment for a referendum at the committee stage. Because the other parties are not voting as a bloc, it's not possible to predict how the vote will fall, but it is expected to be close. If it does pass this reading, it will go to Select Committee, where the public will have the chance to have their say. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
It's 14 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint on RNZ National. Police are fanned out across eastern Christchurch tonight as they hunt for 21-year-old Liam Strickland in relation to the death of a homeless man yesterday. The man was hit and killed by the driver of a stolen van who was fleeing the police. Police have just announced that they have arrested 6 people after they executed search warrants at 9 properties across Christchurch today. Shortly we will cross to our reporter in Christchurch for the latest, but first, Logan Church spent the day talking to friends of the victim, whose nickname was Dino.
Shore Avenue in New Brighton is still cordoned off today, with forensic teams scouring the grounds for clues that will help put together what happened. A large black tent covers the area where the man was hit and killed. Some locals are leaving flowers at the cordon. The man has not been formally identified, but friends and family have told Checkpoint he lived with his dog in a van in a nearby car park. Trudy Burrows runs the community fridge across the road and is delivering free food to his friends and family.
We know him as we do a lot of the homeless people because they come most days to the fridge to get food, and you get to know what they like and how they are, and they sit there and talk. And he was one of the quieter ones, but he had great manners and he was always a please and thank you man. He was very appreciative of anything he did get.
The man was hit following a police chase that started about 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The police say they were chasing another vehicle and arrested 2 of its 3 occupants. A third man escaped, stole a van and fled. That van hit a man on the Hawke Street and Shaw Avenue intersection. The police are now searching for 21-year-old Liam Strickland in relation to the incident. Sarah Neem, who runs local charity Canterbury Clothing Drive, has been speaking with the victim's sister.
I spoke to her this morning and she's pretty heartbroken. She was in tears, and it's also her birthday today, so it's very difficult for her.
Sarah is appealing for food and other grocery items that she can give to the family.
We're basically just looking for things to help right now. Since the boys are in town, grocery vouchers, grocery items, some beauty items to put towards maybe a hamper, things like that, baking, meals, anything that can just help them make their days a little bit easier, especially since she has 4 children of her own at home, and also his 4 boys. They've come down from Picton.
Back in New Brighton, the organiser of Christchurch charity Streetwise, Ribba Jaden, is looking for donations to help cover funeral costs.
We understand that obviously there's a huge cost, in funerals, and we're doing everything that we can to fundraise for the family to provide some financial support. The financial burden for the funeral is horrific, and they've recently lost their mother, so they do need the financial support.
She says the man was well known amongst the street community.
Lovely man, he's street whānau and ngā whānau, and, he's a family man, a kind man, and it's just really sad to see. Yeah.
How do you think the community has taken this here?
Oh, the community, it's hard. Brighton, we're a huge community, and so he was one of our own Brighton whānau. But even smaller than that, the street whānau is so close, and to lose one of your own, everyone feels that.
As the manhunt for Liam Strickland continues, one of the other men arrested in relation to the incident appeared in the Christchurch District Court today. 27-year-old fisherman Marcel Jaros from Avonhead is charged with unlawfully entering a car and was remanded in custody until next Tuesday. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
You can go now to Logan. He's joining us from Christchurch. Logan, what's the very latest from the police? I think you've heard from them in just the last few minutes.
Yes, Alex. The police have still not found Liam Strickland, yet they have just told us in the last half hour that multiple search warrants were, in fact, carried out today. 9 properties in total were searched across the city. As a result of this, 6 people have been arrested and taken into custody. Also, during these searches, methamphetamine, cannabis and 3 firearms were also found. Now, Liam Strickland, of course, as it was reported yesterday, is being considered by police as dangerous and should not be approached. Therefore, the acting police district commander, Mike Johnson, has decided that until further notice, Canterbury police officers will carry firearms. And we've, of course, not seen a sweeping order like this since the mosque shooting earlier this year. However, in the meantime, police officers are still at the scene of the hit and run yesterday in New Brighton, and a heavy police presence can be seen throughout the city, though in particular the eastern suburbs. We're getting reports of lines of police cars seen on suburban streets in Aranui. But in the meantime, the police say that they're still trying to work out the exact details of what happened and ultimately led to yesterday's tragic death. And from speaking to eyewitnesses and friends today, Alex, those are answers that this community desperately needs at this time.
Thanks very much for the update. Logan Church there from Christchurch, bringing us up to date on the manhunt. Really, the police are saying they're after 21-year-old Liam Strickland. Don't approach him, he's dangerous. And in the meantime, Christchurch police will be armed. They're telling members of the public, if you do see him or have information, get in touch on 111, or you can call Crime Stoppers. It's 0800 555 111. It's coming up to 5:20 here on Checkpoint. We're always keen for your feedback, so you can get in touch. 2101 is the number for the text. Tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. An estimated $3 million worth of cocaine has washed up on a rugged West Auckland beach, much to the surprise of locals. No arrests have been made, and the police are trying to work out where the drugs came from and their intended destination. Our reporter Jordan Bond and video journalist Nick Monroe went out to the coast and filed this report.
A very high tide at Bethells Beach. 19 tightly bound bricks of cocaine wrapped in blue plastic and looking a little worse for wear. It's likely about 6 or 7 kilos in total, and each package is adorned with what looks like a logo and a crest.
My God, idiots, eh? Oh, I just can't believe that people do such things, you know, like it's such a beautiful beach and, you know, ruining it with that kind of stuff coming ashore.
It's like a scene out of a movie. Millions of dollars of illegal drugs wash up on a beach, found by passers-by. Sandra Murphy is out here twice a week, walking her dogs.
No, never seen anything strange out here. But when you mentioned about the cocaine, I suddenly thought about white powder, and I thought, I wonder what's that the dogs were sniffing at there, because, you know, usually I'm a bit of a beach comber and I look around the beach as I'm walking along, so it was a bit strange, but you never know what washes up on these beaches, do you?
Today, Bethells Beach was rough and stormy, with big crashing waves, as it often is. It's a lot of cocaine for a drug that has never been as popular in New Zealand as methamphetamine or MDMA. Carol Smith, walking her son's dog, Frank, was very surprised to hear the news. It travelled quickly down the beach as walkers passed each other.
No, this is a very clean beach, so I didn't expect to find anything here, really.
A recent global drug survey found New Zealand has the most expensive cocaine in the world, more than double the global average. That's attracted some opportunists. In the last few years, there have been some big busts. 35 kilograms in a Diamante horsehead sculpture, 46 kilos at a house in Tauranga, and late last year, a record seizure, 190 kilos in a banana shipment.
It's pretty surprising, yeah. A friend texted me this morning and he was all pretty excited about it, so I was like, I'll go do my usual dog walk, and, you know, but there wasn't much buzz around. There's plenty of police, big boot marks and stuff around there, and, you know, they've had a good look, and they've probably got it all, I'd say.
But that's just what's washed up. The police say there's a small possibility more packages might roll in with the waves. Ryan's down at the beach a couple of times a week. He says it's very quiet during the winter, usually just a handful of people walking their dogs.
Yeah, dead seal down there, and no, just the odd fishing tangle and stuff like that, so nothing as exciting as last night.
There wasn't any sign of police about mid-morning, but they said the Eagle helicopter would be up searching the wider area. Detective Inspector Colin Parmenter wasn't available for an interview, but says over the coming days police will visit the beach in case any more items wash up. Their investigation to work out where the drugs have come from continues, and they're hoping people with information will call Crime Stoppers. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
23 minutes past 5. 2 bodies have been found in the Canadian province of Manitoba, ending a weeks-long manhunt. The police say they're confident the bodies are those of 2 teenagers suspected of the brutal murder of 3 people. The pair are believed to have killed an Australian man and his American girlfriend, and they have been charged with the murder of a Canadian professor in British Columbia last month. Tessa Vanderhart writes for the Winnipeg Free Press and spoke to me earlier from Gillam, Manitoba, as the 2 bodies of the dead suspects were loaded onto planes headed for Winnipeg, and crucial autopsies, which will hopefully give better clues as to exactly what happened.
The latest development, I'm here right now at the Gillam Airport, where we just saw 2 metal coffins being loaded onto 2 separate RCMP airplanes. They're taking them back to Winnipeg for an autopsy, not only to confirm the identity definitively, but also to determine the cause of death, which is something that people have a lot of questions about.
Yes, because these guys were reportedly on foot, and we'd had warnings over the last 2.5 weeks, I think, about just how hard it is to survive in the scrub there. So I guess there's all sorts of conjecture at the moment about whether these guys may have taken their own lives or whether they just succumbed to the elements.
Yeah, and that really won't be clear. There's so many animals in the bush out here that if they were dead for any amount of time, there would be some probably animal involvement. So it wouldn't be easy to tell automatically the cause of death, just without an autopsy. So it will be really important to figure out, and also to figure out the timeline of when this all happened. All we know from RCMP is that it wasn't recent, but they haven't speculated as to, like, these guys have been, the last reported sighting was on July 22nd, so that was 2 weeks ago, more than 2 weeks ago, and so it's really not clear how much of the last 2 weeks they were alive.
And it's very much been described as a manhunt. They've charged for one murder. They're also suspects in a double murder. And have you heard clearly from police just about how they managed to find them?
Yeah, so on Friday they were doing an aerial search in the area. RCMP had pulled back their resources by that time, but were continuing to search with a helicopter, and they noticed an aluminum fishing boat that was just very mangled, and I guess that caught their attention. So they put the focus more on the area around that boat. This is about 9 kilometers from the site where the burned-out Toyota RAV4 was found. So that helped them really zone in on that area. It's not clear if the boat was actually used by them at all. But what did happen is they found the boat, and then they found some items that they say are definitively linked to the 2 suspects. And it's not clear what those items are. All I could get out of RCMP was that there would be no need to DNA test the items. But anyway, so the boat led them to that, and then they were able to narrow the search even further, and a kilometer away from where that boat was spotted was where this morning they were able to find the remains.
Right. Now, Tessa, you've been in the town of Gillam. These guys have also been spotted at different times over the past 2.5 weeks in other surrounding towns. How are people feeling there now that this has come to a close?
People are very relieved. I spoke to some people that were watching it live, and they said it was just like they could see everyone just do a collective exhale. Finally, something, finally a resolution for this. One thing that I've also noted in a lot of people's reactions is sadness. People, even though these men were suspected of doing some horrible things, there's a real sadness for just the loss of life and for young lives that ended in this pretty awful way.
And then what are the police saying now that they've found these bodies? You described earlier on how you saw 2 coffins have been loaded into transport to be taken away. What are they saying to the media now, particularly around all these questions, just about the finer details of how they were tracked down and what may have killed them?
So all of those finer details are going to have to wait. Like I said, in this case in particular, it's going to really require an autopsy to pin down how long they were dead, what killed them. Oh, my goodness. We're just watching now as the planes take off. They're going to head to Winnipeg, and the autopsies will happen soon, and hopefully people will get those answers soon, because people here really do want those answers.
So you're just saying you're watching those planes take off with the 2 bodies now?
Yeah.
Right, and you're saying people there in the town, not obviously not just the victims' families, but people there in the town, and I guess people right across the country want to know exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's really what we heard at the town meeting today, too. People had a lot of questions. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of answers yet, and the remains are going to tell that story as best as we're ever going to know.
Tessa Vanderhart from the Winnipeg Free Press. It's coming up to 5:30 on Checkpoint and RNZ National. Coming up, thousands flock to a Wairarapa rugby pitch to farewell Sir Brian Lahore. Police promise to minimise their presence at Ihumatao after their standoff with protesters or protectors. And forget burning bras, they're going to the Pacific instead. We'd love your feedback. Get in touch on the text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, Checkpoint, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Susanna Leatawa with the headlines.
MPs have spoken out on both sides of the debate as a bill to reform abortion law began its first reading in Parliament this afternoon. The bill would remove abortion from the Crimes Act and treat it as a health issue with a medical test required after 20 weeks of pregnancy. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has told the House that women feel they have to lie to get an abortion with the law as it stands. Serial rapist Stuart Murray Wilson will be released from prison but will be housed within Whanganui prison grounds. He was sentenced to a further 2 years and 4 months imprisonment for historical rapes last year after completing an earlier 21-year sentence. The parole board has decided Wilson can be paroled but under strict supervision. The police in Christchurch say they have arrested 6 people as they continue to search for 21-year-old Liam Strickland, who was wanted in connection with the death of a pedestrian in New Brighton yesterday. The 49-year-old died after being struck by a stolen van following a police pursuit. The police say they carried out search warrants at 9 properties across the city today, and 6 people have been taken into custody. A Rimutaka prison inmate is in hospital after being assaulted by another prisoner. A 45-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder and is due to appear in the Hutt Valley District Court next week. A man swept out to sea from a New Plymouth beach is lucky to be alive after being plucked from the ocean in a dramatic rescue. The man had been walking his dog and was knee-deep in the water at Back Beach when he lost his footing late this morning and was dragged out in a rip. The pilot boat, which rescued him, transferred him to an ambulance which took him to Taranaki Base Hospital in a serious condition. The son of rugby great Sir Brian Lahore has told thousands who gathered to farewell him at Masterton Memorial Park his father travelled the world as All Blacks captain and coach, but he was most at home in the shadow of the Tararuas. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and about 100 current and former All Blacks were among mourners at the funeral this afternoon. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
We'll see you then. Thanks very much, Susanna. Nona Peltier is here, ever faithfully, with the business news.
I'm here.
So, earnings season's underway. How are some companies doing as they're getting their reports in order?
Okay, so we're getting the first sort of wave of reports for companies that have June 30 year ends and or half years, and we're also getting some updates for companies with the July 31st balance date. And so today, the big announcement we had was from AMP and the New Zealand arm of that company. That's a financial services business. Its earnings fell 21% to $22 million. They also announced some strategic changes. They're going to shed all of their New Zealand businesses in the end, including their wealth management business, which they had talked about hanging on to. They're going to sell their life insurance business and so others. They're going to basically quit the New Zealand the New Zealand landscape at some point. So there you go. Okay. I guess the $22 million they made here isn't quite enough.
No.
Who knows?
Not worth it.
Yeah, perhaps not. And also, we had an update from IAG. Now, maybe people aren't familiar with that brand, but they are the insurance company that operates State, NZI, AMI, and the Lumley Insurance brands. Mm-hmm. They made a profit of 390 million Australian dollars in the year to June. That was up 7% over the past year. Well, actually, it was more than that. It was a pretty good income, 79% increase on their profit, and their revenue rose 7%. So they're making it on the margins there. You can honestly say, TNG Global. Maybe we don't remember that name, but it's Turners and Growers. They're veggie and fruit salesman, yeah. Their export, now that company's German-controlled these days, so it's not really widely held by New Zealanders anymore. But its first half profit, it's down 19% to $4 million. And that's primarily because of bad weather in New Zealand, but pretty good weather in Australia. So their apples they had a smaller volume of apples in the harvest, and they were smaller. So they didn't make as much money, no.
You say good weather, I'd say just drier weather.
Well, I would say adverse weather. And we also heard from Kathmandu. They gave us an update. Mm-hmm. Their company is going to report a record profit. It's going to be somewhere an underlying profit of between 55 and 57 million, which is about 5 million better than last year. Mm. And they say the main drivers for that is their Oboz shoe company that they bought about a year or so ago. And stronger sales in Australia, not to mention New Zealand was struggling a little bit because of the weak economy. Mm-hmm. And of course, that brings me to the I guess, the markets.
Yes.
Or do we have time to talk about the Napier port?
Or very quickly, because the shares are in hot demand, apparently.
They're in hot demand. They are going to list that. That company is going to be listed, and they've set the share price at $2.60 each, and there was very strong interest in that. Just saying. Okay. There you go. We don't have a lot of time today, do we?
Let's hit the markets.
All right, so we have the New Zealand dollar. It featured in the international reports because that shockwave really did go around the world. Yeah. So the New Zealand dollar is buying 64.5 US cents, 95.3 cents Australian, and 53.1 British pence. So it recovered a little bit after that shock drop in the OCR. That's the official cash rate. And, another strong day on the market, as you would expect, with lower interest rates on the way. The NZX Top 50 Index, it rose 0.8%, so another strong day, a gain of 88 points to 10,874.
Wonderful.
There you go.
She's got all the numbers. Nona Peltier with the latest in the business news. Coming up to 24 minutes to 6. The police will minimise their presence at Ihumātao and have promised that there won't be a repeat of Monday night when a tense standoff ensued with protesters. It's been just over 2 weeks since occupiers opposing a new housing development at the South Auckland site were served an eviction notice. County's Manukau District Commander Jill Rogers told RNZ this week that police had been told directly by protest organisers of their intention to breach protest lines on Monday, and therefore they increased their numbers. But after meetings with the Police Deputy Commissioner and protesters, they now say it was a miscommunication that they don't want to happen again. Marnie Dunlop has more.
Tensions boiled over when police arrived on Monday night to block occupiers from moving further down Ihumātao Quarry Road. Police increased their numbers because they say they were told by organisers they planned to push past the cordon and reoccupy the land. But a sole representative, Stephanie Tuffer, said that was a huge miscommunication.
On the Monday evening, the communication came out that police thought that we intended to go and occupy Kaitiaki Village. That was never our intention. We didn't have any actions. I think some of you might have been here on that evening that we were doing that. We were actually hunkering down to cook dinner. It was really unexpected, but we've decided to move forward from that because we've agreed that we don't want that to happen again.
Wali Haumaha was welcomed onto Ihumātao on Tuesday night in an attempt to rebuild the trust between police and protesters. And after closed-door hui with protesters, he finally addressed media today, saying they will reduce numbers of police on the whenua and assign an officer to work alongside organisers.
We've got to a point now where we can minimise the police presence on this whenua and just maintain a small number around the health and safety for everyone. We've arrived at a good point to prevent any miscommunication that may have occurred in the past, and so to avoid that we have appointed somebody to come along and sit alongside of our people, the organisers that are here, and we will continue to work together along those lines.
Wali Haumaha couldn't specify the exact numbers they would be reduced to. He also wouldn't address allegations that sole organiser Pania Newton was pushed on Monday night, but says he has spoken to her and he wants to move forward. On Tuesday, protesters at the site felt the trust had been broken with the police, but Mana Whenua representative Haki Wilson says he believes after these face-to-face meetings it's been restored.
Yes, I think so. I think it's been restored because, like Wally said, it's better to come kanohi ki te kanohi, kōrero i ngā kōrero, to make things better and to make things right for both parties. So I think, it's good.
Mr Wilson says he is certain that protesters will stick to the peaceful kaupapa.
We have been reinforcing our manaakitanga, make sure our tauterangi Māori, our rongo is within our campus, and that's our tikanga.
Sole Representative Stephanie Tuffer says they want to ensure they work well together with the police for all who stay and visit the land.
Moving from a position of them being here as enforcers to being here as part of the safety plan that we have. So how they'll be here will be our collaboration together on moving from what it has been to let's work for the safety.
Meanwhile, today, Ihumātao has hosted a range of groups, including tangata whenua from Hawaii, prominent lawyer Annette Sykes, and more than 100 Māori nurses. For Checkpoint, ko Marnie Dunlop tēnei.
It's coming up to 20 minutes to 6. Christchurch residents who aren't able to live in their homes damaged by the massive Northwood gas explosion have received some good news today. Christchurch City councillors voted to give them a roughly 15% discount on their rates. 3 weeks on from the explosion, at least 9 homes surrounding the epicentre of the blast have either limited access or cannot be entered at all by order of the council. Conan Young reports.
Graham Stewart's home backs onto the house where the explosion happened. He predicts he'll be out of his property for at least 6 months while it's repaired.
Ceilings have come down, windows blown out, peculiarly because the explosion has sucked the windows out. Roofing tiles, concrete tiles from the house that was damaged, must have been thrown a fair altitude up in the air because they've come down and smashed into some of them straight through the ceilings inside the house.
Mr. Stewart is glad he'll now only be billed based on the value of his land, not the value of his land and house, representing a roughly 50% discount on his rates. He says it would have been unfair for the council to charge him the full amount on a home he couldn't live in.
We're not using sewage from the property. We're not using basically services, so that I don't think we'll be getting rubbish collection there.
Today, the council agreed with Mr. Stewart and voted to open up a process for anybody out of their homes in Northwood to apply for a rebate on their rates. Ahead of the vote, the councillor representing Northwood, Aaron Kewen, said the same approach should be applied to anybody who is not able to live in their home.
No matter whether it's a flood, fire, explosion, anything else that could go wrong, I don't want to name the others and jinx the city any more than it is should not pay rates. If you've got something that you cannot use, you should not be paying a tax on it.
Mayor Leanne Dalzell made reference to an earlier staff recommendation to reject any rates relief for Northwood residents.
I know that this paper, probably just its publication, would have caused some concern in the community and probably anxiety as well.
Councillor Jamie Goff said the rebate was the right thing to do.
This is very similar to the earthquake-affected rates remission. Charging people rates on the improvement value of their homes when they literally no longer have one would be heartless and illogical.
Graham Stewart says as a superannuitant, every little bit counts. He says he'll use the money to help pay for the temporary accommodation he's living in while his home is repaired. Kei Ototahi Ahau, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Conan Young tēnei.
At 18 minutes to 6, members of Parliament are voting right now on Andrew Little's and the government's abortion bill. We'll try to get those numbers to you and update you as soon as we can. In the meantime, the United States President Donald Trump has met victims and first responders from the weekend's mass shootings in Texas and Ohio amid accusations of anti-immigrant and racially charged rhetoric. The shootings in El Paso and Dayton happened just 13 hours apart, killing a total of 31 people and reopening a national debate on hate crime and gun safety. Hundreds of protesters, some holding signs reading "Trump is racist" and "Send him back," gathered to condemn Mr. Trump in both cities. The BBC's John Sopel is there and has this report from El Paso.
President Trump and First Lady Melania arrived in El Paso, and it's fair to say civic leaders aren't hanging out the flags for him. A white nationalist killed 22 people, targeting Hispanics. Before leaving the White House, the president denied that his fiery rhetoric on immigration had contributed to the problem.
I am concerned about the rise of any group of hate. I don't like it. Any group of hate, I am, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's any other kind of supremacy, whether it's Antifa, whether it's any group of hate, I am very concerned about it, and I'll do something about it.
Trump is responsible, and he is part of the problem.
In El Paso, a big protest has been taking place against the visit. The main speaker, the former congressman for the area, and Democratic presidential hopeful Beto O'Rourke. He's critical of the president coming.
I'm just so focused, as are my fellow El Pasoans, on this community, on the families who are struggling with a loved one who's still recuperating or who've lost someone in their lives. And I think the president's visit distracts from that healing and our ability as a community to come together.
There's always the hope on occasions like this that something good might emerge out of something so dreadful. But in America today, the problems of hate, of guns, of racism seem as intractable as ever. These two nurses, Erin and Stephanie, were working at the local hospital last Saturday.
Everything was chaotic. Nurses get called in and things are different and you can feel somber in the hospital.
And what do you feel about the president coming today?
I think it's probably a bad timing for him to come right now.
I would like him to bring unity, not only to El Paso, Texas, but to our country.
What's going on? What's going on?
But it's now emerged that a shooting which took place 2 weeks ago in Gilroy, California, is now also being treated as an act of domestic terrorism, like El Paso.
From the FBI over the last 2 years, the number of their investigations are racially motivated, and within that category, the majority are white supremacist extremists motivated.
This morning, President Trump was in Dayton, Ohio, where 9 people were killed at the weekend, meeting survivors and their relatives. No journalists were allowed in. He offered consolation, but in terms of concrete measures to tackle gun violence, he was much more vague.
John Sopel there at 5:45. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. We are keen for your feedback. Do get in touch if you want to text in the numbers 2101. We're at Checkpoint RNZ on Twitter. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the email address. Now, earlier we mentioned bras, so we thought we'd better explain ourselves. You can forget burning them. Bras donated by New Zealand women are giving their sisters in the Pacific a new sense of freedom. More than 1,500 bras collected by women's networks in 2 government departments have been donated to the Uplift project supporting women of the Pacific Islands who've never owned a bra. Our reporter Charlotte Cook joined them today as they did the final count.
That's the sound of one of countless boxes packed full of bras being taped up, ready to go to Fiji, for women eager to holster the girls. A charity called the Uplift Project has been collecting and distributing bras and underwear to women in remote areas, giving them access to a properly fitted, good quality bra. For many women in the Pacific, a bra can be their ticket to freedom. Women's networks at the Ministry of Justice and ACC set themselves a goal of collecting 1,000 bras, but they've racked up hundreds more.
We collected 1,550 bras, 187 sets of togs, 82 pairs of underwear, 1 sports top, 7 sets of nursing pads, and 3 bra extenders to a total of 1,830 items.
The Ministry of Justice's Belinda Waters says the idea to start a collection was sparked by something many women will identify with: a wardrobe full of new or barely used bras.
The thing that really got me was that a lot of these women will never own another bra in their lives. This is the only one they'll ever get. And for us, we have so many, to just realise that there's people out there that, really need it and we can really help with that. It's just amazing.
Ms Waters says she's amazed with the mountain of donations and the efforts which people went to. One man even gave them money to buy some new ones because he didn't fancy braving the world of lingerie but wanted to be involved. The Uplift Project's New Zealand coordinator, Pauline Watson, says since 2012, New Zealand women have sent around 50,000 bras to Tonga, Samoa, Fiji and Vanuatu, but demand is always growing. She says without a bra, some women of the Pacific Islands can't be employed. Nursing mothers don't leave the house because they're leaking, and schoolgirls stop playing sport without the support.
Some households in the islands, they have 1 bra between 5 women. And so whoever has the appointment or has to go to town that day gets the bra. They have to share it. So forget about sizing. So often, Uplift, it's the only bra they've ever had in their life.
Ms Watson says the bras give women an important sense of freedom and empowerment. Mary Calstrap works in Vanuatu, visiting remote villages to rehome the bras. She says the women who receive them are extremely happy and overwhelmed with their newfound freedom.
They can go to church, like to have a new bra, or they can go out to public meetings to share their ideas. Because when they didn't have bras, they were afraid to go out to communities and do community work. But when they have a good bra, they can go out to do the community work, going to church on Sundays, meetings with the other groups of women in the community.
The women from Ms Calstrap's village who have received bras wanted to give something back as a thank you for the support. They had nothing to give but their voices. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
Wonderful news, and good to see some practical help there for our Pacific whānau up north. At almost 10 minutes to 6, the All Black selectors have signalled their intentions to keep the Bledisloe Cup well and truly locked away at New Zealand rugby headquarters for another year. Coach Steve Hansen has today named what appears to be his strongest available lineup for the first of 2 tests against Australia in Perth on Saturday night. The most notable of the selections comes in the loose forwards, where Ardie Savea has been chosen for his first test start at blindside flanker. The Hurricanes' star will be part of a formidable trio alongside skipper Kieran Reid as well as Sam Cane. Speaking about the makeup of the loose forwards, Steve Hansen says there was a straightforward rationale behind picking Savea, Reid and Cane to start together.
Probably the best back row we can put on the park. You know, you've got Ardie, who's been in outstanding form all super season. Sam Cane's come back and gives us a real physical presence on the park and is a natural 7. And Rido, he's coming back into his true form. So once people see what we're doing on Saturday, they'll agree that they're the 3 guys we should have picked.
Well, joining me in the studio is Clay Wilson, our sports reporter, to discuss the makeup of the All Blacks team. It seems to be taking the structure of a pretty formidable pack, something that you wouldn't be surprised seeing picked for the first World Cup game, for example.
No, I think this was signalled that those first 2 tests were going to be about experimenting a little without the Crusaders for the first test, and we did really see 2 quite experimental sides in those tests against Argentina and South Africa. But we were always going to see something closer to a strongest 15, strongest 23 for these 2 Bledisloe Cup tests, given they're one of the last 3 games the All Blacks have before the World Cup. So definitely close to what looks like the strongest available team that Hansen could have picked.
And happy to see Ardie Savea at blindside?
I think it was inevitable. His form's been irresistible, and you combine that with Liam Squire being absent and not really having a really solid 6 there, having Ardie Savea, Sam Cane and Kieran Reid slowly coming back to form as well, all 3 in really good form. Just makes sense to have all 3 of them on the park at the same time. It's pretty explosive, and you don't really lose anything. Ardie Savea, a dynamic player, but you don't really lose anything in terms of physicality that you might think that with a Liam Squire you might get. Ardie Savea is pretty menacing with ball in hand and can hit pretty hard defensively, so you don't lose really anything in that sense.
Yeah, we've seen what he can do, and talking about athleticism, we've got Scott Barrett back from injury, the coach really saying that that's one of his pluses as well as being a huge unit. Great timing given Brady Retallick's injury.
Yeah, it's perfect timing with Retallick being out, having another world-class lock to come in there. But while a lock, we've seen how mobile he can be, and we think we talked last week about the potential of Scott Barrett maybe getting a run in that number 6 role. So having him at lock really gives that pack a lot of mobility. So perhaps we're going to see them really try and run them out, especially in the forwards.
And the backs, of course, so Sonny Bill out, Antoinette Brown in, but of course got some stability there with Barrett at fullback and Mo'unga in first 5, so not too much change there.
Yeah, Steve Hansen said this afternoon he thought Beauden Barrett was the best player on the park against South Africa, and they really liked what they saw in the Mo'unga-Barrett combination at first 5 and fullback in that South Africa test. I guess we didn't get to see the best of it. No. The All Blacks weren't at their best, but they clearly like what they saw and want to have another crack at seeing those 2 playmakers on the field together, and that's obviously the way they're looking to go for the World Cup with their up-tempo, fast attacking style of play.
And just quickly looking at the Wallabies, because we've got a blast from the past, bad boy James O'Connor chosen to start.
Yeah, Steve Hansen actually admitted that he didn't pick it at all, and he'd been surprised by seeing James O'Connor brought in. His first test start in 6 years. Of course, he's had his indiscretions in the past, but he's obviously worked his way back and got back into this Wallabies team. So really interesting to see him named, and interesting to see how he goes. A very dynamic and fast player with the ability to break play open, so we'll see him there. No David Pocock, he hasn't made it as was sort of expected, so All Blacks won't have to contend with him, but still expecting, Steve Hansen says, a pretty big test on Saturday night.
And also no Bernard Foley, he's left right out of the team, the coach sticking with Christian Lealifano, who's had that inspiring recovery from leukemia and played pretty well last week.
Yeah, it looks as though with that selection that Lealifano has moved ahead in that number 10 stakes for the Wallabies. So yeah, Bernard Foley perhaps with a little bit of work to do, and maybe has missed his chance.
There we go. All right, well, all eyes on that game. It's across in Perth, right? So what time are we going to be able to watch it?
Oh, it'll be later in the night. It'll be something like midnight, I think, by the time it gets to here.
Gets going. Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Clay Wilson there with the latest on the All Black selection ahead of Saturday's Bledisloe Cup against the Wallabies in Perth. And it's coming up to, 5.5 minutes to 6. In breaking news now, the abortion legislation bill has passed its first reading in Parliament. Now, the bill would remove abortion from the Crimes Act and instead treat it as a health issue. The bill's passed 94 votes to 23. There were some very passionate speeches in Parliament all throughout the evening. It will now go through to the select committee stage. We'll have more on this story after the 6 o'clock news. Now, from the would you be game enough to try it file, scientists who've been studying the recovery of the land abandoned after the 1986 Chernobyl disaster have produced the first consumable product from inside the exclusion zone. They've made, you guessed it, vodka, using ingredients from within the area around the damaged nuclear plant. The distilled spirit is called Atomic, and it's completely radiation-free. The BBC's Victoria Gill met those behind it and had a try.
On a small farm deep in the abandoned exclusion zone surrounding the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Dr. Gennady Laptev shows me a handful of rye that's just been harvested.
We know that this area is still populated, a lot of people live there, but by law they are forbidden to use this land for agriculture, for production of agriculture stuff. Yeah.
Dr. Laptev has worked in the exclusion zone since just months after the accident at the nuclear power plant. Those regulations forbidding agriculture and development on contaminated land have been in place here since the 1986 catastrophe. He says this experiment demonstrates that abandoned land around the exclusion zone could be put back into productive use.
We can use this land in diverse way, and we can produce something which will be totally clean from the radioactivity. Yeah.
But while this started as a scientific agricultural test, it's now moved beyond that. The researchers who set this up are now using their Chernobyl rye grain, along with water from the exclusion zone aquifer, to make the zone's first vodka. Atomic, as they've named this grain-based spirit, is the first consumer product to be made from ingredients sourced from inside the exclusion zone.
I tremble when I pick it up because this is the only bottle in existence.
Professor Jim Smith from the University of Portsmouth is co-creator of what he calls his moonshine artisanal vodka.
This is no more radioactive than any other vodka. We've had two of the best laboratories in the world looking to see if they can find any radioactivity from Chernobyl, and they haven't found any.
This started as an experiment in what happens to this crop when it grows. Yeah. Why was your idea to make a spirit?
In the Chernobyl affected areas, there are some hotspots, but in most of those areas, the big problem for people is that they just don't have the proper diet, they don't have the good health services, they don't have jobs, they don't have investment. And so we came up with this idea to try and start a business to sell our artisan vodka and hopefully make a profit, which we can then distribute the majority of the profits to the local people to support their development.
The Chernobyl Spirit Company, as this social enterprise has been named, is still in the process of gaining permission from the government to produce and sell their spirit in Ukraine. Once they have that, the aim is to produce 500 bottles this year, and initially to sell it to the rapidly increasing number of tourists that now visit the exclusion zone. For now, only one bottle has been made, so I was allowed just a taste.
In Ukraine, we don't say Nastarovia in Ukraine, we say Budma.
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 At 2 minutes to 6, one of the most distasteful episodes in modern US political history will be turned into a TV drama. The BBC's Charlotte Gallagher has more.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
One of the most famous quotes by a US president, and those comments by Bill Clinton in 1998 came back to haunt him just months later when he was forced to admit he'd lied under oath and to the American people.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. I misled people, including even my wife.
His lies led to him being impeached, but he was later acquitted and remained in power until 2001. The scandal gripped not just the American public, but people across the world. Monica Lewinsky later said she'd been hounded and terrorised by prosecutors and diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So it might come as a surprise that she's agreed to co-produce a programme about the affair. Miss Lewinsky said she'd been hesitant and scared, but was now looking forward to fully reclaiming her own story. The actor Beanie Feldstein will play her in the drama. Some have suggested that in today's Me Too era, Monica Lewinsky, who was only 22 when the affair began, would be seen as a victim, not a homewrecker and a figure of fun. She herself now says she sees the relationship as a gross abuse of power. The decision to broadcast the series in the run-up to the presidential election has angered some. The American journalist Mark Harris said it was an abysmal idea and a disservice to a fragile political system. But the chairman of the FX network, John Landgraf, said he didn't think the show was going to decide the election, calling the suggestion hysterical. As for Bill and Hillary Clinton, neither of them are being consulted about the show.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. The abortion legislation bill has passed its first reading in Parliament by an overwhelming majority. The vote was 94 in favour and 23 opposed. MPs started the debate just after question time this afternoon and have just held a conscience vote. Both New Zealand First and the Greens voted as a bloc in support. Several MPs voiced their objections to the bill, both on religious grounds and concerns the regime would become too liberal. Those in support argued it should be treated as a health issue and women should not be criminalised for having an abortion. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, made this appeal.
The time is right for this debate. The time is right for us to finally put women's dignity and their rights at the centre of this discussion. And I ask as we do so, that we do so with dignity.
Jacinda Ardern. New Zealand First will push for a referendum during the committee stage. All Canterbury police have been armed as the hunt continues for a man wanted in connection with the hit-and-run death of a homeless man. The 49-year-old pedestrian died when he was hit by a stolen van in New Brighton yesterday afternoon. Raids have been carried out across the city for 21-year-old Liam Strickland, who the police say is dangerous and should not be approached. Acting District Commander Mike Johnson says because of the manhunt, he has authorised routine arming of all Canterbury police staff. Mr Johnson says as part of the investigation, officers searched 9 properties across Christchurch today and 6 people were taken into custody. Methamphetamine, cannabis and 3 firearms were also located. The police are appealing to the public to report any sightings of Mr Strickland or information on his whereabouts. A mana whenua representative, Adi Humatau, says trust has been restored with police following a tense 5-hour standoff with police earlier this week. The Police Deputy Commissioner and protest organisers have been in Hui the last few days to discuss what happened and find a way forward. Mahani Dunlop reports.
Wally Homaha and protest organisers say the extra officers on Monday night were due to a huge miscommunication. He says the police will minimise their presence, although couldn't specify a number. Mr Homaha says the police will appoint someone to work alongside those occupying the site to avoid a repeat of Monday night when police numbers significantly increased without warning. On Tuesday, protesters felt the trust had been broken with the police, but mana whenua representative Haki Wilson says he believes it's now been restored. He says the police have made things right by sorting things out face to face. Ko Mani Dunlop tēnei.
The Wellington Regional Council was told today it has no remit to review or revoke consents for water bottling, even if it wants to. The issue of water allocation, in particular for bottling, has come to the fore after an Upper Hutt consent to draw 180 million litres a year became public 6 years after it was approved. The council is now considering a new 30-year consent in Lower Hutt to take just over 400 million litres a year. The council's Environment Regulation Manager, Sean Andrew Author, told the Environment Committee today consents can only be reviewed if there is a concern that the environment might be being harmed.
The legislation itself doesn't focus on who uses water and why. It's environmental effects based. So those considerations around effects are very much the same if we were dealing with a water bottling plant, as if we were dealing with an irrigator in the Wairarapa, as if we were dealing with a brewery up in Upper Hutt as well.
Sean Andrew Author says the legislation the council operates within is relatively restrictive. An eroding landfill at Hector on the west coast has been given a partial lifeline by a new trust. Storm swells have threatened the landfill, which contains industrial waste and asbestos. The Mayor Gary Howard said last week that it contained waste from a former state coal mine and was up to the government to fix, not ratepayers. The Bulla District Council has announced today it is working alongside Bathurst Resources and Tallies Group to establish a community trust fund. $200,000 will be distributed annually, and this year it will be put towards fixing the old Hector landfill. One person has been killed and others injured after a magnitude 6 quake shook Taiwan earlier today. The quake's epicentre was about 36 kilometres east of the eastern city of Yilan. Authorities say it was felt across the island. More than 10,000 households are without power. Residents in the capital Taipei reported being woken by falling objects and toppling furniture. People in central Japan have been warned to stay away from a volcano which has erupted for the first time in 4 years. Mount Asama sent ash and smoke nearly 2 kilometres into the sky. The National Meteorological Agency warned that rocks and hot gas could affect areas within a radius of 4 kilometres from the volcano. It's issued a level 3 warning on a scale of up to 5. It's coming up to 5.5 minutes past 6. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says there was a straightforward rationale behind picking Ardie Savea at blindside flanker for the opening match of the Bledisloe Cup. After 36 tests, the Hurricane star will start in the number 6 jersey for the first time in Perth on Saturday night. Savea will combine with captain Kieran Reid and Sam Cane in a formidable loose forward trio, and Hansen says it made sense to start all 3 players.
Probably the best back row we can put on the park. You know, you've got Ardie, who's been in outstanding form all super season. Sam Cane's come back and gives us a real physical presence on the park and is a natural 7. And Rido, he's coming back into his true form. So once people see what we're doing on Saturday, they'll agree that they're the 3 guys we should have picked.
Meanwhile, the Wallabies have named James O'Connor for his first Test start in 6 years. The 29-year-old has been selected at centre, but star flanker David Pocock has not been named as he continues to recover from an injured calf. 2 new caps have been named to make their Black Ferns debut against Australia in Perth on Saturday. North Harbour prop Olivia Ward-Dewan and Otago midfielder Kilisitina Moata-Ane have been selected in the reserves for the first Laurie O'Reilly Memorial Trophy match. It's a case of third-time lucky for Moata-Ane, who has been close to donning the black jersey twice before, only to be ruled out with a late injury. And overnight rain in Colombo has delayed the start of play on day 1 of the Black Caps 3-day match against Sri Lanka A. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Alison Balance meets Gadget, a rat-detecting canine. Raymond Sangapolotelli keeps it real south of the Tamaki, but north of the Bombays. We have a window on the world of food when the food supply is under siege. And this week's overseas correspondent, a woman in Bangalore, Shobha Narayan, is on the line from California, but she's been thinking a lot about Kashmir. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland through to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Occasional showers, possibly heavy and thundery, mainly in the west. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape. A few showers gradually clearing tomorrow, but rain returning later again in the day. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly fine. Isolated showers about the Tararua district. Scattered rain tomorrow, gradually clearing apart from southern Wairarapa. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly fine. Showers or rain developing tomorrow evening. Bulla and Westland, showers becoming widespread this evening with possible thunderstorms. Showers becoming isolated tomorrow before rain returns tomorrow evening. For Fiordland and Stewart Island, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, turning to isolated showers this evening and gradually clearing tomorrow. For the remainder of Southland and Otago, scattered rain spreading north tonight, clearing tomorrow morning, then showers developing in the evening. And Chatham Islands, fine tonight, A few showers tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thanks very much, Susanna. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Alex Perrottet. Parliament has voted overwhelmingly in favour of abortion law changes at the first reading a short time ago. The bill would remove abortion from the Crimes Act and instead treat it as a health issue, and will make abortions available as of right up to 20 weeks of pregnancy and possible after that if a doctor agrees. Now, our political reporter Joe Moyer has been watching the first reading unfold at Parliament and joins us from there now. Good evening to you, Joe. That's a huge margin, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is huge, Alex. We always thought that it would be a little bit closer, to be honest, but then over the last couple of days, as we've kind of gone out and asked individual MPs how they would vote, it did become, I guess, more obvious really that it was probably going to get a decent majority. However, 94 votes for and 23 against is definitely a lot more probably than what people had predicted. Within that, you had both the Green Party and New Zealand First vote as a block rather than those individual conscience votes. Both Greens and New Zealand First voted in favour as well. The other thing with the first reading, of course, is quite often you have MPs who may not be completely convinced about the issue. They'll decide to vote at the first reading for it, just to get it to that select committee stage. Obviously, that's an opportunity for the public to put in their submissions and for MPs to actually hear those views. And a lot of MPs want to give the public that opportunity.
Yes, so you mentioned there some people maybe waving it through, like we heard with the euthanasia debate, but might not vote for it in the end. I think Suat William Sio Aupito, his title there, I think mentioned that in terms of how he was going to vote. It seemed, at least from what I caught of it, that the debates were fairly respectful, but definitely impassioned. What were some of the standout speeches for you?
Yeah, there were some really impassioned and really emotional speeches too. We did see some tears in the House here tonight. Two of the new National MPs, Agnes Lohini and Paulo Garcia, both had very strong speeches against abortion. Just to give you a bit of an idea, Agnes Lohini described abortion as a woman making a lifestyle choice, and then you had Paulo Garcia talking about unwanted pregnancies being an absence of love between a mother and a child. Now, on the other side of that, you had the Prime Minister, who normally isn't actually in the House on a Thursday, but she did come back to Parliament because she wanted to make a speech in the House on this bill, because obviously she's advocated very strongly for abortion reform. Now, she said that the time was right to put women's dignity at the centre of all of this.
Yeah, and then in terms of some of those other voices against it, because it's only a small number, but I just thought it interesting that we've heard from some of those, I guess, women of the National Party. We don't often hear from Agnes Lohini, you mentioned, Harete Hipango, Joe Hayes as well, also speaking against it. I think Tracy Martin might have been one of the ones you were alluding to that had some tears tonight. In a sense, she's been wedged in between this debate between New Zealand First and Labour over the organisation of the law and this proposed referendum. Can you take us into what Tracy Martin was speaking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Tracy Martin's had a tough couple of days, and it really showed on her face today. A mixture of probably being quite torn and potentially a little bit sort of angry and disappointed with the way things played out in her caucus over the last 2 days. Now, just going back to Tuesday morning, this all kick-started in an interview that I did with Tracy Martin on Tuesday morning on Morning Report, where she said that there was going to be no referendum called for by her party. She'd been tasked with negotiating with Andrew Little, who's obviously put the bill forward as Justice Minister, and at no point, she says, and she continues to say, at no point did anything come up in caucus with her colleagues about there being a referendum, so she never passed that on to Andrew Little. We then saw, after the caucus meeting on Tuesday morning, some MPs decided they did want a referendum at the 11th hour. Winston Peters came out and told media that would be happening. Andrew Little was very blindsided by that. Of course, Tracy Martin was as well. And then we ended up with a situation where she came into the House today to speak on behalf of the New Zealand First Party as they're voting for a block. They're planning to vote through for the first and the second reading to get it to the committee stage, where they will have that opportunity to table a referendum. Now, she used her speech today, and she started by saying that she had written the speech before all of this happened on Tuesday, and a plan to make quite a personal speech, voting in favour of the reforms and talking about her own personal experiences. Now, she'd basically ripped that up and said that she had to basically start again, really, because these political events had happened, and she went through the timeline basically and explained what had happened and led to the fact that we had this sort of referendum at the last minute.
Right, OK. So it goes to Select Committee now, and we'll obviously be hearing a lot more about this in the next few days. But thank you very much, Joe Moyer there from the Parliament just after that vote, the first reading vote, waving through the new amendments with changes, a new abortion law. 13 and a half minutes past 6. Thousands have gathered today at a rugby pitch in Masterton to farewell rugby great Sir Brian Lahore. The service was held on the Trust House Memorial Park rugby pitch that he used to play on, while the crowd sat, of course, in the Sir Brian Lahore stand. They heard tales of Sir Brian's life, his love not just of rugby, but farming, his wife Pam, and his 3 children. Laura Dooney went along to the funeral.
Lahore has broken, he's at standoff. This is Lahore from...
As thousands gathered in the Sir Brian Lahore stand, on the pitch he'd played most of his games, the tributes began with footage of him as an All Black. While it was a solemn occasion, there were more laughs than tears, as close friends and family described the man Sir Brian, or BJ, was. Standing next to his father's casket, painted black and adorned with the All Black logo, son David Lahore told the crowd the rugby field was the best place for his father's funeral, in the heart of the people and the place he loved most. He said it was important to remember BJ the man.
I've been pondering the order of BJ's passions in life, and one that keeps popping up is sheep. Slightly bemusing when you think you may figure lower in the pecking order than his beloved sheep. He was indeed a passionate and very talented farmer, and the quality of his stock was a source of great pleasure and pride to him.
He says his father, who'd requested a farmer's funeral, had a singular focus that was extraordinary to behold.
He was able to focus so completely on the task at hand that he could roll his motorbike on himself while grappling with a sheep in a flat paddock and not lose his grip on the animal.
He says his father had a passion for his grandchildren and was a mentor, confidant, but mostly he was their mate. David says their mother Pam was Sir Brian's everything.
She was his rock, his constant, his greatest supporter, his best friend, his passion. There's not enough words to describe that.
Close friend Ivan Grieve spoke about Sir Brian's love of golf and says throughout his life he gave a huge amount to New Zealanders.
I have often thought you would have made a great Governor-General. You have been a great leader of men with high principles, always leading by example and setting giant standards. When you asked me to say a few words today, I was very honoured. Thank you, BJ, for being such an amazing New Zealander and a great mate.
And Gilbert Anoka, the All Blacks mental skills coach, says when he worked with Sir Brian, he told him Mr Anoka was the shrink and Sir Brian was the bush psychologist. He says Sir Brian was an example of everything that is good in a person.
He lived his life in a way that when people think of words like devotion, loyalty, integrity, inspiration and love, they will think of him.
Mr Anoka says Sir Brian had a handshake like no other.
Hands as big as a plate, the grip firm and affirming. Watching him use his cell phone was a joy to behold. My bloody big fingers, you'd hear him say. As he tried to ring Pam or the kids back on the farm.
When the service ended, loved ones and former All Blacks Dan Carter, Richie Mccaw, Michael Jones and John Kerwin formed a guard of honour for the hearse to drive through. A group of boys from Wairarapa College performed kamate as the hearse drove out onto the road. After the funeral, hundreds of people stayed behind, as requested by the family, to take advantage of the rural hospitality offered. Former All Black captain Richie Mccaw was one. He says Sir Brian had good advice for him when he became captain in 2006.
He said, from what I can remember, you just need to do this, this and this, and you'll be sweet as. And it was pretty calming from a guy who's been there and done that.
He says he feels very lucky to have spent time with such a great man. Judging by the crowd gathered in Masterton, Richie Mccaw is one of thousands who have been touched in some way by Sir Brian Lahore. In Masterton, for Checkpoint, call Laura Dooney, Tēnei.
It's right on 18 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After surviving the March mosque massacres that killed 51 and left dozens injured, a group of almost 200 victims and their family members have arrived in Mecca to complete the Hajj, one of the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith. The group, including Superintendent Naila Hassan, are guests of the Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz. Bridget Burke reports.
Still on crutches, almost 5 months after he was shot in the leg inside the Al Noor Mosque, Al-Shahade Sinawi has arrived in Mecca in search of peace.
To come to the sacred place like Mecca, it is a big relief. It is a big relief mentally, and just even also you get like a holiday, if, away from what happened to you in that place.
He says he came to Mecca to remember the friends he lost at the mosque on March 15.
Just some of them, they were very close. They used to come and visit, sometimes on a daily basis. And this is, it's no way to forget. When I go home, I look at the couch where some of them used to sit. I just remind me of them. I see them everywhere.
Accompanying the group, New Zealand's highest-ranking Muslim police officer, Superintendent Naila Hassan, who thanked Saudi Arabia's king for inviting the group on this special journey.
For him to extend this invitation to almost 200 New Zealanders to come and perform Hajj and continue on their journey of rehabilitation has just been something so big for all of us. So to be able to start Hajj in a couple of days is the most exciting day, since that terrorist attack.
Kamal Darwish was killed at the Al Noor Mosque. His mother, who travelled to New Zealand from Jordan for his funeral, died in Christchurch a few days later. The 38-year-old left behind his wife Rana Faraj and 3 children. Speaking in Arabic, Rana Faraj said she was still struggling to believe her husband had passed away. Performing Hajj would help her feel pure from the inside and heal the wounds of the attack. Superintendent Hassan said she felt privileged to be part of the group.
For me personally, it was deeply painful, because being part of that community, but it was also deeply painful being a police officer because, you really feel like your job is to protect people. So that was really tough, but being part of how we have recovered since then as a country and being in the New Zealand Police, I'm so proud to be a police officer in New Zealand and be a Muslim.
Over 1.6 million pilgrims are in Saudi Arabia for the annual Hajj, which concludes on Sunday. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
21 minutes past 6. Wellington regional councillors realised how little power they have in managing consents for water bottling at an Environment Committee meeting today. The council is currently considering granting a 30-year consent to a private New Zealand company to take 432 million litres a year from Lower Hutt's groundwater for bottling. There are 2 existing consents from the same aquifer to draw almost 950 million litres every year, as well as take a consent in Upper Hutt to take 180 million litres of water. Councillors and residents both questioned why consents were being allowed to go on and new ones considered given climate change water restrictions. Emma Hatton has more.
Who has the right to take and bottle the capital's water is in the spotlight after it was revealed that a Tauranga company has a licence to draw more than 180 million litres a year from Upper Hutt's aquifer, bottle it and send it overseas. Public submitters at the start of the meeting made passionate pleas to review and halt any unnecessary existing water take consents and place a moratorium on any new ones. Upper Hutt resident Tracy Ultra told the committee the fact that the consent went through without any public notification was underhanded and should be illegal.
These facts are grounds to revoke the consent. I know you don't have the authority or the process to revoke, so I say invent one. Fight them on behalf of more than 8,000 people who have signed the petition so far.
However, the council's Environment Regulation Manager, Sean Andrew-Author, told the committee consents can only be reviewed if there is a concern that the environment might be being harmed. He says the council has no remit to decline a consent based on its intended purpose.
The legislation itself doesn't focus on who uses water and why. It's environmental effects based. So those considerations around effects are very much the same if we were dealing with a water bottling plant, as if we were dealing with an irrigator in the Wairarapa, as if we were dealing with a brewery up in Upper Hutt as well.
Currently, the Whaitua project is underway to examine water quality and supply in Wellington. When it's completed in 2 years' time, it may suggest changes to the way water is allocated, which in turn could affect future water take consents. However, another submitter, Hutt resident and City Council hopeful Chris Parkin, says action is needed now.
My worry is that we are going to end up finding that the Whaitua process is going to be too slow to stop these things happening. You will end up with a rush of consents, or even the one that we have is enough. The maximum we should be looking at is 5 years.
And while officials conceded they were tightly bound by the existing legislation, namely the Resource Management Act, and there were no grounds to review existing consents or impose a moratorium, councillors searched for options, clearly concerned that they didn't hold much power in the matter. The chair, Sue Kedgley, asked if the council had any power to reduce the term of a consent and make new consents publicly notified, but was quickly shot down, saying even these changes could land the council in legal hot water. The decision was made to mull things over until the next meeting in 6 weeks. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
24.5 minutes past 6. Papua New Guinea's West New Britain province is facing a stern test of its ability to cope with disaster after the latest eruption of Mount Ulawun. The volcano erupted again at the weekend following another major eruption back in June, which prompted mass evacuations from nearby villages. Johnny Blades reports.
Mount Ulawun's latest eruption was bigger than June's, although similar to that event, it quickly settled back from stage 3 to 1 of risk level. However, ash fall between 12 and 15 centimetres thick in some parts has contaminated crops and water supplies over a 15-kilometre radius around the volcano. The coordinator of the Provincial Disaster Committee response team, Wilfred Augustine, says an estimated 15,000 people are now displaced, mostly taking shelter in 5 care centres outside the danger zone.
All people are outside of the danger zone. Our only challenge here is how best we could supply them with the food supplies and non-food items. Basically, canvases, water containers, hygiene kits for females and children, and also food items.
The volcano disaster has had a devastating effect on the local economy, which is heavily reliant on oil palm production. The biggest company working in the affected region is Hagi Oil Palm Limited. Also hurting are local smallholder farmers who work with the company, such as John Marcus, whose family lives close to the volcano's base and have had to move out from their plot to a care centre.
But for now, we are affected, meaning we are not doing any harvest at all. We sell fruit to Hagi Oil Palm. Because of the eruption, the European Union would not be accepting our oil now. Hagi has stopped processing as well.
Wilfred Augustine says heavy rains of recent weeks have compounded the province's problems.
We had heavy flooding. It washed out 2 of our main bridges connecting Kinde and Diara. So my team has had to travel and cross the rivers, swim across the rivers to catch another vehicle, come to the second bridge, cross that river again and get another vehicle to come to the disaster site, the volcano site. So it's currently logistical support and relief supply is a real problem for us.
While the Works Department and partners such as the Red Cross and UNICEF are helping with logistics or relief supply, John Marcus says the province was clearly unprepared for the disaster.
We were never prepared. So was the disaster. It's in the tropics. It rains a lot. But we were not prepared. It's the PNG government's blind eye and the provincial government's blind eye on this disaster relief efforts.
Mr. Augustine says while it's only village elders who can remember an eruption of Mount Ulawun resembling the cracking ferocity of the latest eruption, the province needs to be better prepared in future.
It has really tested the abilities of the authorities to respond. Also, it has put our response plans into question. We need to really look at the response plan, our planning in terms of emergency or evacuation for that matter.
While the provincial disaster team is still assessing the extent of the damage, Mr. Augustine says people remain in shock and on alert for another major eruption. This is Johnny Blades.
And before we go tonight, the head of operations at Port Taranaki has praised the quick actions of staff who rescued a man swept out to sea off a New Plymouth beach today. The man had been walking his dog in knee-deep water when he was knocked over by a large wave and dragged out in a rip. Ashley McDonald told our reporter Robin Martin the three-person crew of the launch Mikotahi responded to a Coast Guard call for assistance at about 11:30 this morning.
And so my Marine Services manager and two of his launch crew quickly got back on the boat and took off, and within 12 minutes were back around at the back beach, around the back of Paratutu there, and managed to follow the pointing arms of a number of onlookers on the beach to the scene of a man in the water, very close to being to giving up. Really, he'd been in the water quite some time, and about 600 metres off the beach at back beach, and they successfully rescued him and got him back to the berth where an ambulance was waiting for them. So it was and he's recovering, we understand, and we wish him all the very best.
Were your staff able to describe what the conditions were like out there?
Yeah, look, there was they were just outside the surf zone, but there was still a couple of metres of chop out there, so it was challenging conditions to recover somebody who was weak in the water. We have a cage that's purpose-built for rescuing someone from the water, and so the cage at the back of the boat, we can use that to manoeuvre the boat under the person and scoot them up in the cage and get them on board that way. So that was very successfully done in this instance, and I hope he bought a lotto ticket because the response time was great, and he's very lucky indeed.
That's all for Checkpoint this evening. Thanks for tuning in. We're back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The abortion legislation bill has passed its first reading in Parliament by 94 votes to 23. Serial rapist Stuart Murray Wilson will be released on parole but will remain on Whanganui prison grounds. Christchurch police have arrested 6 people as they continue to search for a man wanted in connection with the death of a homeless man in New Brighton yesterday. And money from a new community fund is to help fix a disused landfill at Hector on the west coast. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
That's Farmex model. That's what we've got. That's what's been there for the last 25 years.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
There has never been a time in my career as an oncologist where we've had the pace of change that we have right now.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
One of his flunkies in New Zealand had read some poetry by me.